Hi, everybody. Dr. Misty here. Thanks so much for joining me today on Wellness Wednesday. So, today we are going to talk about the emotional eating cycle and how to break some of those codependencies with food for self soothing. Okay, this can be a really big factor with weight gain. It can be a big factor in inflammation because typically the foods that we turn to, and especially when we're stressed out as moms, right? Chocolate, chips, ice cream, all of like the big inflammatory foods. So if you are somebody who does this, you are probably in good company with a lot of other people watching this video because this is a norm in society. It really is. I see messages all around as I'm driving here, like America runs on Dunkin', and I live in New England, so this may not be where you're at, but like, you know, messages where it's like having a bad day, have this, or like, you know what I mean? So I want to help you guys to break through some of those because um, that is driving some of your health issues. Emotional eating, it probably creating more of blood sugar dysregulation, inflammatory issues. If you have any sort of gut dysbiosis, it will drive that up, especially if you have small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, which is more like bloating, gas, constipation, irritable bowel syndrome. That kind of stuff shows up with the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and parasitic infections. So what those bugs count on to live is glucose, sugar, and carbohydrates. So not only is the emotional aspect of it feeding into, you know, it's important to understand so that you can create better coping mechanisms as you go through the day and you're feeling stress. I'll give you a few strategies there, but then I just wanted to share with you guys the emotional eating cycle and how to break it. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Give me 1 second. Figure out how to do this. Share. Okay. Okay. So the cycle of emotional eating. So what happens is something typically, coming over here, something typically creates a circumstance or a trigger that creates a thought and a stress response, right? So the circumstance and trigger, if you're a mother, this can be, your kids fighting. This can be lots of tantrums because they didn't get good sleep at night. Whatever it may be, you might be getting your own emotional triggers, or being in a tough environment. You might have gotten in an argument with your spouse, your boss may be giving you some trouble. Whatever the case may be, you're getting triggered. Okay, and especially when this happens, like you're getting this ping over and over and over, this starts to happen. So when you get that and you feel like this overwhelm, the thought is, I feel blah blah blah, and I need to self-soothe with this before I die. So, and not necessarily your thought is I'm going to die, but what happens, and at least what's happened with me in the past is, I get this like super like bubbling up, overwhelming, like, oh my God, like I can't take the stress, like you know what I mean? I'm going to explode. And obviously you don't want to yell at the kids, or you don't want to get a fight with your spouse. You want to try and soothe that. And this was like so big with, I'll give you an example of this. I used to do this a lot at night, like sugar before I went to bed, which is like probably the worst thing you can do, because my daughter would have tantrums about going to bed and have like some sensory overload. And I just like, it would be so triggering to me, like all the loud noise. Especially with PTSD, you might not have PTSD, but if you, if this is just stressful in general, it was just like, I noticed like I'd go and like reach and crave sugar at the end of the night because I was just like so overwhelmed, and I was taking on a lot of others' responsibility and emotions throughout the day. So it was just kind of like this, like blah, 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 like this layering of bubbling up emotions that created that stress response, right? So this is how it happens. Okay, I need to self-soothe. I don't know how to deal with this, right? Coping mechanism kicks in the form of eating. So this is, emotional eating is a self-soothing coping mechanism, okay? Now, if you are somebody who has food addiction and sugar addiction and binge eating and stuff like that, this is all brought on typically by emotional. Now, what happens and how this is linked to physical health too is because A, the stress response kicks in. B, when your stress response kicks in, it kicks up cortisol, which also drives your blood sugar up. So you are actually getting physiological blood sugar crashes at the same time. And then you're getting more chance for sugar cravings. The other thing, as I mentioned, with the other issues you might be having, if you have gut dysbiosis or anything like that, it's going to drive the need. That's going to be like an underlying driver for your body to crave the sugar. Okay. So that craving is going to be even stronger. But typically the cycle of emotional eating is a form of self-soothing. And this can be really shameful for a lot of women. A lot of women hide this. Like I used to hide chocolate in my car in my center console from my husband. I'm like, oh, don't look in there. Like I'm supposed to be healthy. I'm a nutritionist, right? And I didn't want anybody to know because it was so shameful. But it was like the only way, like I wasn't doing a good job at like recognizing what was triggering me and like working through it and learning to self-soothe. So again, coping mechanism kicks in the form of eating, binge eating, overeating to soothe, and you get that relief, like that dopamine hit, right? You're like, okay, now I feel better. And then comes the reality where you realize that your coping mechanism, here's to 5, doesn't align with your goals, and then you start beating yourself up, right? Does this sound familiar? You feel shame and guilt, right? Shame. The shame is huge. So this shame and guilt over eating this is going to fuel and refuel that trigger. The shame and guilt that you're feeling from feeling out of control is now triggering you again. And then this cycle continues. That is how the emotional cycle of eating can create issues. That can drive weight gain. It can drive, you're on your way to health issues. This is one of the things that happens with the burnout and even adrenal fatigue. If you have adrenal fatigue or like that chronic HPA dysfunction, that you guys have probably, if you've watched some of my other videos, we've talked about the stress response. Again, it's like your body like craves sugar. It'll crave sugar and salt because of what's happening physiologically. So the emotional and physical body are so connected. And this is why you guys hear me talk about this a lot, because they really, you're one in the same body. So this has to be taken into account. So real quick, let's go over to how to break this cycle. So breaking the cycle, essentially you go through this. Here's where the cycle starts, right? The circumstance, the trigger, you're starting to get those bubbly up feelings like, oh, I can't stand it. I feel overwhelmed. Instead of going right towards your patterning and hitting that coping mechanism to soothe with food, you need to work through and identify the feeling that created this problem and tell yourself, like, it's very important to validate, it's okay that you're feeling this way. Let's think about what's going on here. What are you feeling? What's the truth of what you're feeling? And this is where a lot of times people, the eating and like the soothing, whether it's chocolate, whether it's drinking, whether it's whatever it is, a cigarette, the person would rather go towards the coping mechanism that's unhealthy because it's hard to face the reality and the truth of your emotions, okay? And this isn't to shame anybody. Please don't hit that part where this is like, oh, I'm bad for doing this. Like, no, it means you're human. It means you're human. Okay, so we all have our stuff. I just told you about how I used to hide like chocolate bars in my center console because I was stressed out, right? As a physician and a nutritionist and a functional medicine doctor, I'm a human, right? So everybody has their coping mechanism. It's important that you give yourself permission to be human and just identify and step into awareness. Okay, so step 3, and when you feel triggered, is stepping into awareness. Identify the feeling. I feel overwhelmed. I feel like crap. I feel hurt. I feel sad. I feel lonely, whatever it may be. Okay, for you, it might be a different trigger. You might feel triggered and feel like instantly depressed or alone or abandoned or whatever that emotion is. But it's important to identify the feeling with a name and then tell yourself, almost like re-validating yourself, it's okay to feel this right now. And then start digging a little deeper. Now, if you're not able to do that in a minute, I'm going to give you guys some other strategies that you can use to help bring yourself down. Start digging deeper if you're noticing patterns. Like this happens with me, it was like every night at 9:30, 10 o'clock. Okay, why am I, like I'm reaching for chocolate. I need to have chocolate before I go to bed. Dig deeper to solve the underlying problem, okay? And it might not be a huge thing. It might be a small thing, and you're just like, oh, I didn't realize that was happening. Okay, and then you work to resolve it. And then essentially that's like, it's the whole thing is working through your feelings. Congratulations, when you work through your feelings, you won't need your coping mechanism anymore. So it's almost like what this is saying is, instead of soothing that response, the emotional response externally, it's allowing the discomfort in your body for a short period of time and validating it and understanding it and kind of working through it. Okay, once you work through it and you allow yourself to say, oh, okay, that's what I'm feeling, I'm going to stop the share here. Okay, that's what I'm feeling. And just allow yourself, like give yourself permission to be human, give yourself permission to not be perfect, give yourself that leeway and permission, okay? Because otherwise that shame and that guilt of not being perfect or not being in alignment is going to compound. Like one of the things I try and reference as like, okay, you're on the track of eating well, eating healthy. And there's moments where we go like, we kind of sway a little bit, or we like might jump the tracks a little bit and then pop back on. What happens is if you jump the track and then you're like, all right, I'm just like, I did it. Oh my God, I'm going to go, like, I'm going off the cliff. I'm going to crash and burn. And you just like, you're just like, forget it. It's ruined. It's ruined. I went off the track. And you just like that's like what the equivalent is, right? The problem usually is what's happening while you're on the track. It's not that you went off the track. It's that maybe something is too much for you while you're on the track and you're trying too hard to be too perfect, if that makes sense. Okay. So things that you can do if you're having that intense stress response. So if you are a woman who has trouble with dealing with stress, or you might be feeling this fatigue, awareness is huge. I can't stress that enough. Okay, so awareness and kind of stepping back from yourself and being like, I'm having this response. Okay, I'm freaking out. And just owning it, validate it. Okay. Secondly, have backup that you can do. So either, whether it's calling a friend, texting somebody, looking at a picture that brings you back to a peaceful time, going back in your mind to a place that brings you in a peaceful time. Deep breathing is so huge. So taking, like, literally sitting up tall and taking 3 abdominal breaths, like, and allowing your lungs to fill, usually that can be really helpful. This is something I do with my kids, actually, when you're feeling really overwhelmed. And this was somebody just recently taught me this, which it works really nice. I started doing it myself. I was like, hey, this is awesome. I'm going to do this. It was using your fingers and doing a tapping, like, I am so calm. I am so calm. I am so calm. I am so calm. And or stating like what you don't need, or you're free from, I'm free from addiction. I'm free from addiction if it's like a sugar addiction. The other thing is following your hands, like and kind of like following your hands and doing that breathing. That works really well. That's a really good one to do too. It may feel kind of silly, but if you're in front of your kids, think of the modeling that you're doing for them, right? That's huge, huge, huge. Another thing is essential oils. I will always come back to essential oils because they're phenomenal. They work quickly and they work well. My favorite ones during this time, I use doTERRA. So if you guys want any information on where to get these two, I will post the link below. Comment that you want it and I'll post it on the link below. My link, you can get wholesale on the essential oils. These are so powerful. They stop sensory meltdowns with my daughter. They stop panic attacks with me. I use specifically Melissa and a combination of one called Peace and lavender. Sometimes I also use Yarrow Palm or Copaiba. Those are probably one of my top ones to go to. Melissa for a panic attack or like anxiety is like hands down one of the most effective tools I've ever used for momentary panic attacks or feeling stress. It brings that physiological response right down. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. Essential oils are phenomenal. So that's one coping mechanism. The other is there's certain amino acids. So I usually recommend using GABA and L-theanine. So if you feel like you're having a momentary, you're feeling like you're really, really, really hyped and stressed all day, those are things to bring that physiological response down. Okay, and the other thing that you can do is actually some tapping. So tapping is a nice form that you can do to that hits like acupressure points to bring that sympathetic nervous system response down. So you can do forehead tapping, you can do side tapping. A good one is this one with deep breathing. And then tapping in the back of your head too, because that will stimulate the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is helpful with balancing the parasympathetic nervous system. So in the moment, those to get your stress response down, those are some really good tips. And then once you get that stress response down, start to work through those emotions and really validate yourself. So I hope you found that helpful today. I'm rooting for you guys, and this is part of it, is like behavior change and self-awareness is like one of the biggest things that you can do with self-healing. Okay, just take that empowerment into your own hands. Get new tools, and you guys will be well on your way to feeling better, for losing weight. This is something that I teach when I'm health coaching with people, is how, if they're struggling with this type of behavior, how to break that behavior. So Dr. Misty Kadziersko, if this is valuable for you, please give this a like and a share if you find that other people could benefit from this, which, let's be honest, like how many of us do this? Like lots of women do this. Okay, so that'd be great to share this information. A lot of people are struggling and need this information. So thanks so much, and I'll see you next week.